Riley Martinez wiped grease from her hands as she stood beneath the massive Boeing 737, her toolbox scattered around her feet on the hangar floor. The engine cowling lay open like a patient on an operating table, revealing the intricate network of components that kept passengers safe 30,000 feet above ground. She'd been working on aircraft engines for 8 years, ever since graduating from technical school with honors, but today felt different. Today, she was about to discover just how much her expertise was worth to the people who claimed she was just a mechanic. The morning had started like any other at Skyline Aviation Services. Riley arrived at 5:30, coffee in hand, ready to tackle the maintenance schedule for 3 commercial aircraft. Her supervisor, Marcus Thompson, barely acknowledged her presence as she signed in. Marcus had been making her life difficult ever since she'd corrected his assessment of a hydraulic system malfunction 3 months ago. He'd been wrong, dangerously wrong, and Riley's intervention had prevented what could have been a catastrophic failure during flight. Instead of gratitude, she'd earned his resentment. "Martinez, you're on the freight hauler today," Marcus announced, pointing toward the oldest aircraft in their bay. "The new Guy Williams can handle the passenger jets." Riley glanced at Derek Williams, who'd been hired just 2 weeks ago with half her experience and twice her starting salary. The pattern was becoming clear, and it stung more each time. But Riley had learned to channel her frustration into precision work. She approached the freight aircraft with the same meticulous attention she gave every machine, knowing that corners cut in maintenance were measured in human lives. As she worked, Riley noticed something unusual in the engine's calibration system. The sensors weren't responding correctly to her diagnostic tools, and the readouts showed inconsistencies that made her stomach tighten with concern. She'd seen this before in older aircraft, a gradual degradation in the engine management computer that could lead to catastrophic failure if left uncorrected. The fix required a complete recalibration of the flight control systems, a procedure she'd mastered but few others in the facility understood. Riley documented her findings carefully, photographing the diagnostic readings and preparing a detailed report. She knew Marcus would dismiss her concerns if she presented them casually, so she made sure every detail was beyond reproach. The aircraft couldn't safely fly until the issue was resolved, and based on the severity of the problem, she estimated it would take at least 3 days to complete the necessary repairs and recalibration. When she approached Marcus with her findings, his reaction was predictably hostile. "You're trying to create work that isn't there," he accused, barely glancing at her documentation. "This bird flies cargo routes twice a week without problems. Sign off on it and move on to your next assignment." "I can't do that," Riley replied firmly. "The calibration is off by margins that exceed safety tolerances. If this aircraft takes off without proper repairs, the engine management system could fail during critical flight phases. Marcus's face reddened. You're a mechanic, not an engineer. Your job is to follow procedures, not invent problems. Riley felt her patience wearing thin. She'd faced this dismissal countless times, her expertise questioned simply because she didn't fit the traditional image of who belonged in aircraft maintenance. I'm a certified A and P mechanic with specialization in avionics systems. I know what I'm looking at, and I'm telling you this aircraft isn't safe to fly. Sign the paperwork, Martinez. That's an order. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Riley knew that signing off on unsafe aircraft was not just a violation of regulations. It was a betrayal of every pilot and passenger who trusted their lives to her work. She also knew that refusing a direct order would likely cost her job. But some lines couldn't be crossed, regardless of consequences. Marcus stood with his arms crossed, waiting for her compliance. Around them, other mechanics pretended not to notice the confrontation, but Riley could feel their attention. This moment would define not just her career, but her integrity as a professional. I won't sign off on unsafe aircraft, she said quietly but firmly. I'll document my refusal and submit it to the safety board if necessary. Marcus's expression darkened. Pack your tools, Martinez. You're suspended pending review. Riley nodded, having expected this outcome. She gathered her equipment methodically, her mind already working through the implications. As she prepared to leave, she made sure to secure copies of all her diagnostic reports and photographs. If Skyline Aviation wanted to play politics with safety, she'd make sure the right people knew exactly what was happening. Walking toward the exit, Riley passed the passenger jets where Derek was working. He looked up nervously, aware that his inexperience had become a weapon against her competence. She felt no anger toward him personally, but the system that elevated him while diminishing her expertise was something she could no longer tolerate in silence. The parking lot was empty except for a few early shift workers arriving for their day. Riley sat in her truck for a moment, processing what had just happened. She'd been suspended for doing her job correctly, for refusing to compromise on safety standards that existed to protect human lives. The injustice of it burned in her chest, but beneath the anger was something else: determination. Riley had spent years perfecting her craft, learning every system and subsystem of modern aircraft. She understood the delicate balance of forces that kept tons of metal aloft, and she knew that calibration was everything. Without proper calibration, even the most sophisticated aircraft became dangerous. Marcus might have the authority to suspend her, but he couldn't change the fundamental truth. The aircraft she'd flagged was unsafe, and eventually someone would have to address that reality. Starting her truck, Riley began planning her next moves. She had contacts at the Federal Aviation Administration, former colleagues who'd moved into oversight roles. She also had detailed documentation of the safety issues Marcus was choosing to ignore. If Skyline Aviation thought they could silence her concerns by removing her from the equation, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The drive home gave Riley time to think about the bigger picture. This wasn't just about one aircraft or one dismissive supervisor. It was about a culture that valued convenience over safety, politics over expertise. She'd seen it before in other facilities, the gradual erosion of standards that occurred when business pressures overrode engineering judgment. But she'd never been in a position to do anything about it until now. Marcus had made a crucial error in suspending her. By removing her from the facility, he'd eliminated his control over her actions. Riley was no longer bound by company policies or worried about workplace retaliation. She was free to pursue every avenue available to ensure aircraft safety, and she intended to use that freedom effectively. At home, Riley spread her documentation across the kitchen table, organizing everything chronologically. The pattern was clear. Marcus had been cutting corners on maintenance schedules, pressuring mechanics to sign off on marginal repairs, and dismissing safety concerns that didn't align with operational schedules. Riley's suspension was just the latest incident in a series of troubling decisions that prioritized profit over passenger safety. She began drafting a formal complaint to the FAA, detailing not just the immediate safety concerns with the freight aircraft, but the broader pattern of regulatory violations she'd witnessed. Riley knew that federal investigators took these complaints seriously, especially when they came from certified professionals with documented evidence. The process would take time, but it would be thorough. As she worked, Riley's phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Janet Phillips, a fellow mechanic from another facility who'd become a friend over the years. Janet had faced similar challenges as one of the few women in aircraft maintenance, and they'd supported each other through various workplace difficulties. "I heard about what happened," Janet said without preamble. "Marcus is telling people you were insubordinate and refused to follow procedures." Riley wasn't surprised. He's trying to control the narrative before the truth comes out. What truth? Riley explained the situation, describing the calibration problems and Marcus's insistence that she ignore them. Janet listened without interruption, her experience giving her context for the technical details. "You did the right thing," Janet said finally, "but you know this won't end well for you at Skyline." "I know, but I can't live with signing off on unsafe aircraft. If something happened because I stayed silent, I'd never forgive myself." Janet was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I'm filing a complaint with the FAA. Marcus wants to play politics with safety, but federal regulators don't care about his feelings or my job security. They care about preventing crashes. Good, but be careful. Companies like Skyline have lawyers and resources. They'll try to make this about your attitude or performance rather than safety concerns. Riley had already considered this possibility. That's why I documented everything. Let them question my attitude all they want. The diagnostic data speaks for itself. After ending the call, Riley continued working on her complaint. She included detailed technical specifications, photographs of the diagnostic readings, and a timeline of events leading to her suspension. The document grew to 15 pages, each section carefully crafted to present the facts without emotion or personal grievance. By evening, Riley had completed her initial filing. She'd also researched the specific regulations that Marcus was violating, cross-referencing them with industry standards and safety protocols. The case she was building wasn't just about one aircraft or one supervisor. It was about the systematic erosion of safety standards that occurred when regulatory compliance became optional. Riley submitted her complaint electronically, knowing that it would trigger an investigation within days. The FAA took these matters seriously, especially when they involved potential threats to flight safety. She also sent copies to other relevant agencies, creating a paper trail that would be difficult to ignore or suppress. As she prepared for bed, Riley felt a mixture of anxiety and satisfaction. She'd taken a stand for principles that mattered, even knowing it would cost her job. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she could sleep knowing she'd done the right thing. The next morning brought a call from Marcus. His tone was conciliatory, almost friendly, a dramatic shift from his hostility the previous day. "Riley, I've been thinking about yesterday. Maybe we moved too fast. Why don't you come in and we can discuss this situation like professionals?" Riley recognized the attempt at damage control. "What's changed since yesterday?" "Nothing's changed. I just think we should handle this internally rather than making it bigger than it needs to be." The confirmation that Marcus knew about her FAA complaint came sooner than expected. Riley wondered who had informed him, but it didn't matter. Her decision was made. "The aircraft is still unsafe, and I still won't sign off on it. Has anything changed about that?" Marcus's friendly facade cracked. "Come in today or consider your employment terminated." "I'll consider it terminated then. But the aircraft still can't fly safely, Marcus. That problem doesn't disappear because you fire me." The call ended with Marcus's angry voice echoing through the phone. Riley set it aside and continued with her day, knowing that her former supervisor was about to face scrutiny he wasn't prepared for. 2 days later, Riley received a call from FAA Inspector David Chen. His voice was professional but concerned. "Ms. Martinez, I'm calling about your complaint regarding Skyline Aviation Services. We've reviewed your documentation and need to schedule an on-site inspection." Riley felt a surge of vindication. "How can I assist with the inspection?" "We'll need you to walk us through your findings and show us the specific aircraft in question. Are you available tomorrow morning?" "Absolutely. But I should mention that I'm no longer employed by Skyline. I was terminated after filing the complaint." Inspector Chen's tone sharpened. "That's additional information we'll need to address. Retaliation against employees who report safety concerns is a serious violation of federal regulations." The inspection was scheduled for the following day. Riley spent the evening preparing, reviewing her documentation and organizing her thoughts. She knew this would be her opportunity to present the facts clearly and comprehensively. The safety issues she'd identified were real, and tomorrow they would be properly evaluated by professionals who understood the stakes. That night, Riley received a text from Janet. "Word is spreading about the FAA inspection. Marcus is panicking and trying to find someone to recalibrate the aircraft overnight." Riley smiled grimly. Marcus was finally taking the safety concerns seriously, but only because federal regulators were involved. The irony wasn't lost on her that the "just a mechanic" he'd dismissed was now forcing him to address problems he'd tried to ignore. The next morning, Riley arrived at Skyline Aviation 40 minutes before the scheduled inspection. She wasn't surprised to see unusual activity in the hangar, with mechanics working frantically on the aircraft she'd flagged. Marcus was nowhere to be seen, but she could see Derek Williams attempting to perform calibration procedures he clearly didn't understand. Inspector Chen arrived with 2 colleagues, all carrying official credentials and serious expressions. Riley introduced herself and began walking them through her findings, explaining the technical issues she'd discovered and the safety implications of ignoring them. "The calibration system is the heart of modern aircraft engine management," she explained, pointing to the diagnostic equipment. "When these sensors provide inconsistent readings, the flight computer can't make accurate adjustments during different phases of flight. It's like trying to drive a car with a broken speedometer and faulty brakes." Inspector Chen examined the diagnostic data she'd collected, comparing it to current readings from the aircraft. "It appears someone has been working on this system recently. They brought in overnight crews to try to fix the problems I documented," Riley confirmed. "But calibration isn't something you can rush. It requires precise adjustments and extensive testing to ensure reliability." The inspection continued for 3 hours, with Riley providing technical explanations and answering detailed questions about maintenance procedures. The inspectors were thorough, examining not just the specific aircraft in question, but reviewing maintenance records for the entire facility. When Marcus finally appeared, his demeanor was carefully controlled. He greeted the inspectors professionally but avoided eye contact with Riley. "Gentlemen, I hope Ms. Martinez has been helpful. As you can see, we've addressed the concerns she raised." Inspector Chen's response was measured. "We'll need to review all maintenance records for the past 6 months, including any recent work performed on this aircraft. We'll also need to interview other mechanics about standard procedures and oversight." Riley watched Marcus's face pale as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about one aircraft or one complaint. The FAA was conducting a comprehensive review of Skyline's safety practices, and the results would determine whether the facility could continue operating. Over the following days, Riley received updates from various sources about the ongoing investigation. The FAA had grounded 3 aircraft pending complete safety reviews. Marcus had been suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. Derek Williams and several other mechanics were being required to undergo additional training and certification. The most satisfying news came from Janet, who called with an update from her contacts in the industry. "The aircraft you flagged, they brought in a specialist from Boeing to assess the calibration issues. He confirmed everything you documented and said the aircraft was maybe 2 flights away from catastrophic engine failure." Riley felt a deep sense of vindication mixed with sobering awareness of how close they'd come to disaster. Her refusal to sign off on unsafe aircraft had likely prevented a crash that could have killed everyone aboard. 2 weeks after the inspection, Riley received an unexpected call from Jennifer Walsh, the regional safety director for a major airline. "Ms. Martinez, I've been following the situation at Skyline Aviation. I'm impressed by your commitment to safety standards, and I'd like to discuss a position with our maintenance team." The job offer was everything Riley had hoped for: better pay, comprehensive benefits, and most importantly, a work environment where safety concerns were taken seriously rather than dismissed. She accepted immediately, knowing that her stand against Marcus's corner cutting had led to an opportunity that matched her skills and principles. On her last day of unemployment, Riley drove past Skyline Aviation. The hangar was noticeably quieter, with fewer aircraft and reduced activity. She'd heard through industry contacts that the facility was struggling to meet safety requirements imposed by the FAA, and several major contracts had been canceled due to concerns about their maintenance practices. Marcus had been terminated and was reportedly having difficulty finding new employment in the aviation industry. Word had spread quickly about his role in the safety violations, and other facilities were reluctant to hire someone with his track record. Riley felt no personal satisfaction in his downfall, but she was glad that someone who prioritized politics over safety was no longer in a position to endanger lives. The broader impact of her complaint continued to ripple through the industry. The FAA had used the Skyline case as an example in updated safety bulletins, emphasizing the importance of listening to maintenance professionals and taking their concerns seriously. Riley's documentation had become a model for how to properly report safety violations, and she'd been invited to speak at industry conferences about the importance of maintaining standards. At her new job, Riley found herself in an environment where her expertise was valued and respected. Her supervisor, Patricia Williams, was a veteran mechanic who'd risen through the ranks and understood the technical challenges of modern aircraft maintenance. When Riley presented safety concerns, they were evaluated on merit rather than dismissed due to workplace politics. "Your reputation preceded you," Patricia explained during Riley's first week. "The way you handled the Skyline situation showed everyone in the industry what professionalism looks like. We're lucky to have you." Riley settled into her new role with enthusiasm, knowing that her work was appreciated and her safety concerns would be taken seriously. The aircraft she maintained were newer and more sophisticated than those at Skyline, requiring advanced diagnostic skills and precise calibration techniques. It was exactly the kind of challenging work she'd trained for and excelled at. 3 months into her new position, Riley received a call from Inspector Chen. "Ms. Martinez, I wanted to update you on the final resolution of the Skyline case. The facility has been required to implement comprehensive safety protocols, and all their mechanics must complete additional certification training. Your complaint led to changes that will benefit the entire industry." Riley felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that her stand had created lasting improvements in aviation safety. The personal cost had been significant, but the broader impact made it worthwhile. She'd proven that individual professionals could make a difference when they refused to compromise on principles that mattered. As she continued working on complex aircraft systems, Riley often thought about the importance of calibration in all aspects of life. Just as aircraft required precise adjustments to function safely, workplace cultures needed constant attention to maintain proper standards. Her experience at Skyline had taught her that sometimes the most important calibration was the one that aligned personal integrity with professional responsibility. The story of her confrontation with Marcus had become something of a legend in aviation maintenance circles. Young mechanics would approach her at conferences, seeking advice about how to handle situations where safety concerns were dismissed or minimized. Riley always emphasized the importance of documentation, persistence, and maintaining professional standards even when facing pressure to compromise. "Remember," she would tell them, "we're not just mechanics. We're the last line of defense between aircraft and disaster. When we sign off on maintenance work, we're taking responsibility for every life that depends on that aircraft. That responsibility doesn't disappear because someone in management wants to cut corners." Riley's career flourished in her new environment. She became a specialist in advanced avionics systems, working on the most sophisticated aircraft in the fleet. Her expertise was sought after by manufacturers and regulators alike, and she found herself contributing to the development of new safety protocols and maintenance procedures. The irony wasn't lost on her that Marcus had tried to diminish her by calling her just a mechanic, when in fact being a mechanic was exactly what had given her the expertise to prevent a potential disaster. Her technical knowledge, combined with her unwillingness to compromise on safety, had created a ripple effect that improved standards throughout the industry. 5 years after leaving Skyline, Riley was promoted to lead maintenance engineer, overseeing a team of skilled professionals who shared her commitment to excellence. She made sure that every member of her team understood that their work mattered, that their expertise was valued, and that safety concerns would always be taken seriously. The aircraft she'd flagged at Skyline had eventually been retired after investigators determined that its problems were too extensive for cost-effective repair. The freight company that operated it had sued Skyline for endangering their operations and received a substantial settlement. Marcus's decision to ignore her safety concerns had ultimately cost his company millions of dollars and its reputation in the industry. Riley often reflected on how different things might have been if Marcus had simply listened to her initial concerns. The aircraft could have been repaired properly, the safety issues addressed, and the company could have continued operating without federal intervention. Instead, his refusal to respect her expertise had triggered a chain of events that destroyed his career and damaged his company beyond repair. The lesson was clear. In aviation, as in life, proper calibration required attention to detail, respect for expertise, and unwillingness to compromise on fundamental principles. Riley had learned that being just a mechanic meant being responsible for the lives of everyone who trusted their safety to her work. It was a responsibility she'd never take lightly, and a standard she'd never allow anyone to compromise. As she looked toward the future, Riley knew that her stand against Marcus had defined not just her career, but her character. She'd proven that individual integrity could triumph over institutional pressure, that technical expertise deserved respect regardless of who possessed it, and that some principles were worth fighting for regardless of personal cost. The aircraft she maintained now flew safely, because she'd refused to sign off on unsafe conditions years ago. The pilots who trusted her work, the passengers who depended on her expertise, and the industry that had learned from her example all benefited from her unwillingness to compromise on safety. In the end, she discovered that being just a mechanic meant being exactly what the aviation industry needed. Someone who understood that proper calibration was everything, and who refused to accept anything less than perfect.